we've got Chloe in Michigan, who says the USA is not a Christian nation, who she just thought it'd be nice to find common ground with atheists. Yeah, Chloe?
Hello. Yeah,
Hey,
hi.
Chloe.
Hey.
Hey. And real quick, before the whole, feeling that the U.S. is not a Christian nation, I just wanted to say something for the guy who just called about the loss of his dog. There was something that tugged at me when he said that he, was an anti-therapy but didn't want to take resources away from the people who really needed it. I really know that dynamic in so many ways, and I don't know if he can hear this or if he could find it out later, but I know what it is to try and put something about your own needs down because of thinking other people might need something more. And my sister and I lost 2 really key pets last summer, and it's not. Sometimes it is just the loss of the animal, but also, it's also a ripping away of, what that animal helped you cope with or just whatever. There's just a lot there, and therapy can also help to untangle all that. It's not just about the pet. It's about a lot of things. So my heart really went out to him when he thought about not really, I don't know, when he sounded reluctant about therapy because he thought other people might need it more. And yeah, so I just wanted to put that out there.
I agree 100%.
100%. Yeah. If you're thinking that, then you definitely probably need to make the call.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Making the call also demonstrates increased demand, which helps people staff better. So don't take one for the team, help the team get bigger.
Right.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about the U.S. is not a Christian nation, even though you are a theist. I assume a Christian?
Yeah. Yes, I am. And I know that, in so many ways, the denomination that I was raised in and still theologically identify with would, maybe lose their minds. I don't know exactly. I just feel like there'd be tension. But, when is the U.S. a Christian nation, I've become really familiar with the critiques that, when somebody says, well, that's not real Christianity, and then that, I guess, has become some kind of a trope. But based on, my convictions about what true Christianity should be, even though I recognize that there's, I think that, one nation under God, there's language in, our founding documents and our origins, and I know that there are attempts and everything, but when I look at what happens so much, the huge trends, especially coming from the people who most loudly identify as Christians, I just don't see the attitude of service, of Jesus taking off his outer garments to wash the feet of his disciples. I don't see the attitude of trying to put other people first. I don't see really truly seeking, a personal relationship with God being a priority in most people and in most churches, most denominations who are, talking about being, like the true Christians or whatnot. And just putting that out there is kind of why I see all these trends. And more than ever, I look at how so many Christians have given religion and Christianity the feel and the name that it has. And that's why I feel like I need to conscientiously say I don't think that the U.S. is a Christian nation.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to start with, the no true Christian thing is also a fallacy, right? It's known as the no true Scotsman fallacy, because how do you define what a true Christian is? But I agree with you that some of the main tenets and a lot of the things that we see, when we see Congress critters praying in public, we know that was kind of, poo-pooed by the JC himself. There's other things that they do that's also not exactly part of what happened or what Jesus was saying you should do. The U.S. is a Christian nation, but Jesus's nation is in heaven. It's not on earth. So how can we be a Christian nation just based on that? So yeah,
Right.
there's a couple of those things. But I think Cross-Examined is about to lay some legal stuff down on us here.
Yeah, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. My question for you is, for Chloe, is when friends and associates near you who are still religious, I don't know if you have any. Do you have people near you who would agree that the United States is a Christian nation? What do you think?
I do, yeah.
What do you think they mean by that? What do they mean when they say the United States is a Christian nation? Because it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
To be honest, I can't give you a clear answer on that. I think that I have an intuitive feel of the types of things they'd say, and that if they were to answer, I'd be like, yep, that sounds familiar. Yep, that makes sense. I was a pastor's wife for 4 years, actually mostly in the Bible Belt in Mississippi, Alabama, and West Virginia for about 4 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, like, I think that that's kind of the area where people would be most inclined to say that, yes, the U.S. is a Christian nation.
Right.
And where people would be most inclined to, to freak out, like, oh, socialism, communism, about, like, or just, oh, the world's coming to an end because of, gay marriage, equal rights, proper medical care and safety for trans people and such, like,
right.
and just trying to do good for the poor and be good to immigrants, like all kinds of things that are just, healthy and loving and, appropriate. Like, and I love the people that I met very dearly. I love people, but
sure,
I have a feeling like I would recognize the kinds of things they'd say in answer to that, but I can't regurgitate them for you.
That's okay, because I think what you've demonstrated is what I have experienced as well. No, absolutely. What you have experienced is what I've experienced, which is it's all wrapped up in one big ball, and it's hard to pull out one little piece. And saying that this is a Christian nation is it's a bumper sticker logic, right? It's what we call a thought ending cliche. It's something that I just say in response to a lot of things so I can stop thinking about it and just say that thing, and it makes me feel better. What I have found when I read about this is that it has elements of it can mean legally we are a Christian nation, and that is wrong on every level, and I can explain why. But it also means we are a majority Christian.
I'm very much a separation of church and state person, but continue.
Sure. It sounded like it. I suspected that. So, but it can mean that they're like, we aren't, but there shouldn't be a separation. It can mean that. It can also mean what I think it means a lot of time, which is I'm a typically white evangelical Christian, and I see my power waning. I feel like I am losing power. I feel like when other people gain rights, it means I'm losing my rights. I can't be like, I can't just have cops go and beat up people that are disturbing me anymore. They actually have like due process and rights and all that stuff. And it used to be if there were any of these gypsy Jewish people in town, we would just run them out of town and keep this place nice. Like that's the mentality. They won't go that far, but that's really where it comes from is it used to be my country, and now I can't say it's my country anymore. And it gets disguised in this, we are a Christian nation. It's why I opened the show with the Kenneth Copeland claims, and they are flat out lies. I did a whole episode on this. I have this book I will recommend to anybody, The Founding Myth by Andrew Seidel. It utterly destroys the legal side of it. But I think probably what you and I experience, or probably most people, it's not as clean cut. That religion takes this this banner role, that it is the banner, but the actual issues are economics, they are racial, they are gender based, they are power based, all of those things. And then when they go to church and the local pastor who wants to keep me happy tells me it's not my fault that I'm losing my job, or it's not my fault that I feel uncomfortable about the gay person at my daughter's prom or whatever, it gets wrapped up in religion, and it's just a quick way to say it's a Christian nation. And what they really mean is, I don't like what's happening and I want it to stop. I think that's really what goes on with most of the conversation. The problem is you get certain people that gain power politically that truly believe no, like I want to have a criminal system where I can find somebody guilty of Exodus 24:21 or whatever. I'm just pulling a number out, but they want that to be the law. They want you to go on trial for violating these biblical things. And we're seeing it now with the loss of Roe v. Wade, right? We're seeing it with this court where they want to push religion fully into government. We have, my favorite example is there was a guy that was on the committee, the Energy Committee for Congress, who got up in Congress during session and said, we don't even have to investigate climate change because God promised in the Bible he would never flood the earth again. It should be case closed. Not even should we do anything about it, but we don't want to investigate it. And that's the threat, is when we get this confused, it's a religious thing, and then a certain portion of our country says, yeah, it really is a religious thing, and that's the solution. And that's what we're seeing ever since, quite frankly, a reaction to the Obama election is that, oh, wow, I'm losing power, religion. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing today.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, when you mentioned, first of all, man, it's hard to know where to start. When you said, people being upset, like, oh, other people are getting rich, that means that I'm losing them. That whole mentality, again, I find it to be antithetical to what I understand to be true Christianity, because it is just antithetical to generosity, unselfishness, wanting goodness for other people, believing that, according to my persuasion from the Bible, I believe that, God is the source of all resources, and that all resources, like, we are stewards of them, but that ultimately what we need and what's available, like, there's enough for everyone, and we should want good things for the people, and we should want goodness, safety, everything that we enjoy. We should want that for others, rather than feeling like, oh, I'm going to be at a loss here, rather than just trying to spread the goodness around. And then there's something else that you said, about the weather, the planet. Like, well, God promised he's never going to flood the world again. Well, I mean, the world being flooded again, first of all, like, that's one very unique type of thing, but also that kind of thing brings up this term I've coined, about something that's not biblically loyal, in the sense of being comprehensive with, like, everything in the Bible, examined together. And there are other places, like, in the Gospels, where Jesus clearly talks about, stuff that's going to happen in end times, where the world is not going to be okay. The planet's not going to be okay. There'll be famines and earthquakes in various places, and these are all just the beginning of birth pains when he's talking about his second coming. But, like, there's places in the New Testament, plenty, where Jesus himself is talking about stuff that's going to be changing in the planet itself. And,
but I'm going to jump in here real quickly.
Yeah, I also wanted to jump in too. I think we may have the same thought.
One last thing.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
One last thing. In Genesis, again, if he wants to be biblically loyal as a Christian, in Genesis, God said to take care of the earth. Like,
yeah.
He's skipping over to, like, a later Genesis chapter, like, God's not going to flood it again, but, like, God told humans, and I'm kind of doing this thing of, like, internal critique, like, as a Christian, and he says this, but, like, the Bible says God told everyone to take care of the earth.
But it said a lot of other things too, right? And I'll defer to Jim, because I'm pretty sure he's going to be on the same path.
Yeah. So when God says there are going to be earthquakes and floods, what did he mean? Because there were earthquakes and floods when the Bible was written. Just nobody knew about it because the Middle East is fairly stable geologically. There are earthquakes all around the world, and have been. They're not increasing or decreasing with any regularity, as far as I know. Storms certainly are, but that's because we're heating the planet up. So that's to be expected. Right. But, he says this, and for me, it's he's saying this from the point of view of someone who lives in the Middle East and doesn't know that there are areas where earthquakes happen, fairly frequently. Not necessarily weekly, but maybe once a year you get a little minor one, and major ones here and there. California comes to mind, that are geologically active. There are areas that flood more than others. The Euphrates floods and the Nile floods in the Middle East, but so does the Mississippi, the Amazon, and I forget the name of the river in China, but there are other places that flood too. So for him to say that,
Well, actually,
it's such a
the verse I was-
non-starter for me.
Well, the point that I
the
wanted to
verse I was
follow on,
quoting
because
actually
Jim's,
doesn't mention
hold on
God,
one second,
it
real
mentions
quick here, Chloe. I agree with what Jim was saying, but I wanted to add another take on it too, because Jim is doing what I would do, but I was going to do something slightly different as well, which is there's a reason that we sometimes call the Bible the great big book of multiple choice, right? And what that's kind of the underlying thing you're talking about, Chloe, is this sort of, you need to take this holistic approach to the Bible. You need to take a look, not you, but you as a citizen of the United States, all people need to take a look and say, why did that congressman say that? Did he say it because he's cherry picking that one thing, which is the first layer? That could be it. He's just cherry picking, that sums up what you're talking about. You don't want people to cherry pick. But he could also be doing it for more cynical reasons. He could also be saying, I'm on the Energy Committee. I am a conservative. I'm a friend of Exxon and all the big oil. And I need to get rid of any idea that we need to investigate climate change. Investigate, not just do something about it, but investigate it. So I am going to use this cherry-picked verse to get up and say on the floor of Congress that we don't need to do this. And it will, A, show I'm a Christian man and I'm taking charge and standing up for my religion. That will get me votes, just that alone. But it will also get me money from big oil and anybody else who wants to not worry about their effect on the climate. And it will also lead my voters to cherry pick that same verse when they get into a conversation about climate change, so they can have the same thought ending cliche in their head. Oh, God said he'd never flood the earth again, therefore I don't have to worry about it. So it all gets, again, mixed up in this big ball, this confusing ball of motives and reasons and all of that. But in the core, I agree with you that yes, people will cherry pick the Bible left and right because they can, because it's written in a way where I can say, well, it says this over here and it says that over there. And if you've ever had to try to have a conversation with somebody to reconcile those two, there are entire careers of preachers who go out and write about this stuff and say, well, generally the message is to be nice, so therefore we should interpret this passage that says be mean. That's a metaphor, or that's out of context, or whatever it may be. When in reality, we do have to face the fact that there's contradictions after contradictions, and there's cherry picking opportunities all over the place. It could have, whoever was the cause for writing the Bible might have thought about knowing that this would happen and have made it a little clearer, don't you think?
Well, I get what you're saying. With the whole, if a person is responsible for writing the Bible, wouldn't they make it clearer? And if I agreed that, there's like one particular person who's responsible for the Bible being written in the way that it is, with the kind of agenda that we would have when we write books, then I would, just really have no problem with your point.
But how do you explain, just to hammer on that point, how do you explain the fact there's at least 1,000 different denominations, all of whom disagree on fundamental points of what to be a Christian, what it means to be a Christian, and they all use the Bible for their reference? For instance, the Westboro Baptist Church, right? I would say that they are the closest to the letter of the Bible of all the Christian religions. They're also the most horrible people, which I think goes hand in hand. But
hand in hand with being close, not hand in hand with being a Christian, just to clarify.
Well, yeah.
Being close to the core message. Yeah, exactly.
If they're really close to the Bible, but they're really awful people, then how are they close to all the places in the New Testament, both in Jesus and in the apostles' writings about like the
because they're taking those literally.
They make one. You got to honor their logic. They make one unsubstantiated claim, and that is the Bible is literally true. And they say that, and then everything they do follows from that one, in my mind, mistake. They don't have enough evidence to support the fact that the Bible is literally true. But they run with that, and they say, oh, it says here that we should stone people who are gay. So yeah, they're for killing people who are gay. Oh, it says in the New Testament, I came not to change the law, but fulfill it. And I won't. And the end times won't come until every jot and tittle, and all of those lines about they say, okay, yeah, Jesus says these laws are still in effect. He's the New Testament. He's a new covenant, but the old laws are still in effect. So that means we should still stone gay people. And they literally, intellectually, honestly go with that path, and they become what Jim says, which is horrible people, because they're basing these laws, which were written by, they started at least with Bronze Age goat herders who didn't know where the sun went at night, and they were coming up with a morality that they still follow today, and that's the real problem.
Well, so you're mentioning certain portions that they're really strict with, but if you don't mind, I'd like to read something here, and just everything that you've said, they clash with. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position.
So I'm going to put on my my lawyer hat for a second. I'm going to grant that. We'll grant all of that. Okay, I'm not going to sweep it under the carpet. I think the part that you are missing is a West Baptist church, or excuse me, Westboro Baptist church person would say, it is the greatest form of love for me to cajole, push, do whatever it can to make sure that people are following the word of God so that they can go to heaven. It is the greatest thing, because I am being chastised. I am being hated. And the Bible says, if I am hated and ridiculed, then I'm doing the right thing. So they will take what you're saying and say, yes, it says, let's shorten it to love thy neighbor. Okay. It says love thy neighbor. I'm going to quibble over what means neighbor, but love can come in many forms. And my love is, I'm going to make sure people know the word of God and know that they have every opportunity to be saved. And that's my job for my entire life on earth. And that's what they're doing. What do you say to that?
Well, I actually am glad that you interrupted me when you did, because, to that, I would still say that, they would take what I just read and then, have their version of love that you just said. But then in that case, their version of love is still unfaithful. And I'm going to skip a little bit here and say,
before you keep reading, let me ask you a question.
This is short. But yes, you can ask me a question, but this is short.
Okay. They have their interpretation of the Bible. You have your interpretation of the Bible. How should I determine whose interpretation is the correct? What I'm doing is a critique of their behavior based on you telling me that they take the Bible literally. And so I'm reading places here that are quite literal. And by the fact that they then, you just said that they're saying they follow that.
I know, but then they're not really taking it literally.
Yes, they are. They're taking every line literally. How do I know who is correct, your interpretation or theirs? What's my objective method for determining whose interpretation of a work of literature is correct?
So I'm going to, I feel like there's kind of something like a disconnect, because they're taking something literally, but, I'm going to read these other.
Let me ask you a question. What does the word colored mean? What does the word colored mean?
Well, there's the cultural connotation of colored, meaning somebody who's not white. And then there's, colored meaning like something that, has a color like one of the rainbow colors. You could say this is a colored piece of fabric, or
sure.
There's the.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with you. There's at least two definitions. The reason I mention that is the Civil Rights Act said you're not allowed to discriminate based on color. The Civil Rights Act does not define the word color. So what did they mean by colored? Let's say a group of Native Americans sued after the Civil Rights Act is passed because of discriminatory tests in schools or something like that. Are Native Americans colored under the Civil Rights Act? We don't know. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but it's this is a
I'm sorry. My brain skipped off. Do you mind asking me that last question?
I was just posing a hypothetical situation because this is what actually happened after the Civil Rights Act. Okay, a little bit of background. Civil Rights Act was to this day, the longest debate as number of hours in Congress to try to get a bill passed in the history of the United States. They debated the heck out of it. There were articles written about it. There were books written about it before it got published. It took a year to get it published. And its purpose was to ban discrimination based on colored, yet they didn't define what colored mean in the legislation itself. So my question was, hey, are Native Americans colored under the act? And people have gone to court over this, and some people say yes, and some people say no. How do we decide? We go back and look at what all the people were debating. Some people that were debating it said yes. Some people said no. Do I pull out a dictionary? This is what's called statutory interpretation, and it still applies to biblical stuff. So you can't come in like the conservatives do on the court and say, I read what the words on the page, and presto, I know what they mean, which is, I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but it smells of that I read the words in the Bible and presto, I know what the literal interpretation is, because there are sometimes multiple literal interpretations, and love is a very squishy word. So if I'm loving my neighbor, I can love them by being affectionate toward them, but I can also love them by punishing them. So that's my point is, and I think that's where Jim is going as well, very well, to say,
exactly where I'm going.
Hey, we need to all get into a place where we realize that there are ambiguities, that the Bible is not perfect, that the Bible uses a lot of terminology that's been translated, that's been misquoted, that's been all sorts of things, right? So to say the literal meaning is very, very hard. And so if anybody comes in and says, boom, I come in, I see love, and I know what it means, and I'm going to stick with that, great. But where it counts is when they go back and they say, it says right here, you should stone gay people, literally. And it's hard to misinterpret that. And then they go to the New Testament and it says, I came not to do away with the law, but fulfill it, and nothing shall change. They take that literally. And then they say, okay, well, then Jesus said love and all of this stuff. So how do I reconcile those two things that are true? Stone the gays and love people. Okay, love the gays, but stone them. That's the literal interpretation.
And this is an interpretation that somebody like William Legg Craig has actually agreed with. He said that the killing of the babies, when God ordered the Canaanites to be killed, committing genocide, that was a good thing because it kept the babies from growing up to be sinners. And that was better for them. That's the kind of logic you have to use if you're going to interpret the Bible literally. And this is why I'm no longer interested in how you interpret the Bible. What I'm really interested in is exactly what Cross-Examine was getting to, is how do I know who is right in their interpretation, you or Westboro Baptist Church? What's the objective test I can apply to figure that out?
Well, I don't have an answer for that, but I do believe that from what you're sharing, both of you, that I still personally maintain that the way that Westboro Baptist Church interprets and calls himself being literal about the Bible, I still argue that they're not, and that they're also not studying well enough.
Okay, so they're telling us the same thing about you. Who's right?
I think
do you wear fabrics of you wear clothing of mixed fabrics? Do you have tattoos? Do you speak in church? Because they're going to say all of those things are wrong, and it's very clear in the Bible.
You want to ask me who's right, and here
I'm asking you who has the proper insight to know not only what the Bible literally means, but then when we can add on that it was divinely inspired and all that stuff. But let's just stick with the meaning. Like, they're telling me that you are misinterpreting, let's say, the word love or be kind or whatever, and you're telling me that they're misinterpreting. I want to side with you because you're the good person. I think you know what the right thing is doing, and you're saying, okay, well, I need to read the Bible through the lens of my modern morality, and this is the only reasonable interpretation. I think you're using reasonable when you mean literal. Maybe. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I think you're the better person, but I can't, when I look at the actual text that's going on the page, you know, like sort of a lawyer job of like, what would a judge do when this was presented in them? And you are arguing over the meaning of these words. Where's the evidence? Where's the tiebreaker? Where's the extra textual evidence of intent here? And I don't think we have any. So I think your argument about, hey, let's take the whole context of it is interesting, but I think there's people who do that and come up to different conclusions than you as well. So we're still stuck with the same problem.
When I call and they ask if I'm an atheist or a theist, and then I think that earlier you guys asked me, you know, if I was a Christian, and you know, when we have these different biblical interpretation difficulties, you know, and then you know the generic term, most people don't say I'm a theist. Most people say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, and that word comes from Christ. And so this may sound like the not most intellectual, but I think that looking at the example of Jesus in what's recorded in his life in the four Gospels, Christians should be held to that standard. And what he did when he lived out his time and how he treated people, and you know, he was not a pro stoner. In fact, he advocated to not stone.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with you that if people had your attitude, the world would be in a much, much better place. The problem is what that is an argument from definition, like, hey, the word Christian comes from Christ, so definitionally we should focus on this more. And that doesn't hold a lot of weight with a lot of other people because they will disagree with you.
Christians say that Jesus is supposed to be the center. He's the Son of God. He's everything. And so they should be looking at him and how he lived, what we have record of. They should be filtering their lives and their decisions through what he demonstrated.
Where does it say that in the Bible?
Violence.
Where does it say that in the Bible? Live your life like Jesus did. Where does it say that literally in the Bible?
Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you.
That's a good one.
And what? Yeah, that's a good one. What do you mean by love? Is it loving to attempt to prevent somebody from being gay? By any means necessary. Yeah.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
I don't believe
that's not loving?
No.
Okay. Westboro Baptist Church disagrees with you. How do I know which of you is right? Do I just stack up Bible verses? Whoever has the most Bible verses is correct? Is there something I can do to actually look at how to interpret the Bible that is objective, that everyone can agree with?
I think that Christians should look at Christ.
But that's not an answer to the question.
Strive to be like Christ. That kind of is my answer. Like, I know you're asking me for an intellectual biblical interpretation answer, but But Christians say that Jesus is the center. And so I'm kind of critiquing along that logic that it's supposed to be in every denomination of Christianity.
Right. And I don't know a single Christian who disagrees with you. Yeah. And I don't know of any Christian denomination that disagrees with you. And yet you can't tell me how to correctly interpret the Bible.
Well, and let's look at
right?
let's live like Jesus, because I think we can even examine that, because some people might say, well, you know, Jesus wasn't great either in the Bible, right? Did Jesus ever tell slaves to tell people not to enslave people? He didn't say that. In fact, he did a lot of weird stuff. He murdered a bunch of pigs to cast out demons. He told people to hate their mother and father and hate themselves. There's a lot of things that Jesus did that were weird, like he beat up the money changers in the temple, right? So to say live like Jesus, again, I think, and again, it's because you're a good person, you're almost cherry picking Jesus's life as well. Like if you just Google bad things that Jesus did, you'll get lists of 20, 30, 40 things out of the Bible that are like, what?
Well, you know, you made a list there and you said Jesus murdered a bunch of pigs. He didn't. He sent the demons. He's like, okay, go into the pigs. So he let them do that. The demons decided to throw the pigs off the cliff.
But he knew what the end result of doing that would be. Right.
Yeah, he ran them off a cliff, if I recall correctly, right? He sent a herd of pigs off a cliff, plummeting to their death. He killed fig trees because they were cursed, right? Or something like that. So anyway, my
And
point is, you say do everything Jesus did. We can point to a lot of things that Jesus did that I don't think you would want him to do. Like he went in, let's just take the money changers, went in and just beat people up because he didn't like them.
He did.
I don't think you're advocating that people should say, I should beat up people I don't like.
Sir, you're being inaccurate. He did not beat people up. He flipped over tables and he let the animals go because people were being extorted.
Yeah, I don't.
What was the whip for? What was the whip for?
Anyway, Chloe, we are running way over.
They are hurting animals.
Okay, I think Jim, what we're seeing here is there's a lot of cherry picking going on now. To say, oh, that was okay because he just went in and what's called threatened them or extorted them with violence. Get out of here. I'm mad. I'm going to threaten you with violence. That's okay because it wasn't beating people, even though he had a whip made of, I forget what it was.
It is okay to beat your slaves as long as they don't die within 3 days. So
Jesus was fine with that.
Yeah. So Chloe, we are running a little bit long and we've had a great conversation with you and I do hope you call back. I also hope you've come to with an answer to how do you correctly interpret the Bible and in such a way that everybody would agree with it when most people don't agree on how to interpret the Bible and yet they all agree with everything you said.
I agree. I think Chloe was an excellent call. Chloe, I think you're a wonderful person. I really appreciate the conversation. I think you would be, if you haven't done it already, an excellent person to go and start studying this stuff and start getting into a scholarly relationship with this sort of subject matter, because the world needs people on both sides to actually be honest and go in and get into the original text, get into what evidence we actually have, and then have the real discussions. And I think you'll find that when you do that, there's a reason this debate has been going on for centuries because there is no final answer. It's all ambiguous.
I have a degree. It's not one degree is not a be all end all, but I did study this. I do intend to continue and I have been self-educating to continue my education, but
wonderful.
I have studied this formally on a college level.
I love it. Please keep it up because you're obviously passionate. You're obviously intelligent, and I don't care whether or not you're Christian. I just think the more people involved at that level, the better, because we'll have better conversations.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Any final thoughts, Chloe?
That sums it up.
If not,
where do we go from here, right? Like,
right.
I agree with you. That the United States is not a Christian nation.
I do have one.
Huh?
I do have one. And again, I know that it might just, restart the same, but this one that I thought was this one last bit here. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. And let no debt, like that language, let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another, and that love does no harm. And I know that people then get in and they do their own justifications of how they define it. Well, there's this, that, and the other. But then, I'm not going to read 1 Corinthians 13 right now, but there's a very clear standard of kindness, patience, not being proud and not dishonoring others, not being easily angered, and always being protective rather than, a lot of the stuff that other people are doing, which is very dishonoring, which is very unkind, impatient, and awful. So that's what I want to finish with.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day, and call in earlier next time so we can talk to you longer. We'd appreciate it. Have a good weekend.